We Spartans are descended from Hercules himself. Taught never to retreat, never to surrender. Taught that death in the battlefield is the greatest glory he could achieve in his life. Spartans, the finest soldiers the world has ever known.
It's quiet now. They came from the blackness.
Be afraid! Sparta will burn to the ground! The 1,000 nations of the Persian Empire descend upon you!
What must a king do to save his world?
Instead, ask yourself, what should a free man do?
Threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
We will stand and fight!
A new age has begun.
An age of freedom! And all who know that 300 Spartans give their last breath to defend it! Spartans! Tonight we dine in hell! But take from them everything!
Alrighty, let's get right into it. This is episode 6 of Shankism, Persian Wars. Oh, that's a good thing I have a spare here. From 499 to 479, we have the Persian Wars. Now, when last we left off, we were talking about Sparta and Athens, okay? Two completely different cultures. One is a warrior culture. They're all about the military, survival of the fittest. Sparta, that is. Athens, they're democratic. They're philosophers. They talk out their problems. Well, they're going to need to ally with one another. They always butted heads. They're never really friends, okay? Now, they're going to have to ally in order to defeat a further and much powerful opponent. What you see in purple here, everything here is what we consider Greek, the Hellenistic states. These are all little tiny individual city-states. They're all just encompassing this whole entire region, all the way up into the Bosphorus Strait, up at the very top of your paper in your screen, at the top right-hand corner. Okay, so the Persian Wars. Let's begin now. If you look very carefully, look right here. Or not, it won't go. Just move me to the side. I'll move back into the screen. Here I go. A little bit here. Oh. Okay. Okay. So, let's get into it. The Persian War. All right. So, if you remember before, there was the Persians, all right, from Mesopotamia. This big, powerful empire that just kind of ruled through everybody. Now they're going to interact with the group of people that we know as the Greeks. So there's this group off. If you go back one slide here, you look. All right, look where this I'm pointing at. Ionia. Okay, Ionia is a Greek city-state that's on Asia Minor. Okay, across the Aegean. All right, Athens is over here in the Attic Peninsula. Sparta is located in the Peloponnesian Peninsula. There's a city-state, and as Persia keeps pushing west into Europe and west to Greek territory, this group called the Ionian Greeks, well, they eventually rebel. They had been taken over by the Persians, and they rebel. They're like, well, we don't want to go against these Persians anymore. We're tired of being ruled by Persians, so we're going to rebel. So what they do, these Ionian Greeks, okay, Ionian Greeks at the top there, and for some reason it cuts off down at the bottom. You can't really see it so well, but Sorry about that. But the Ionian Greeks rebel against the Persians. As you see, that purple line right there is representing the Greeks, and the other line that you have there is representing the Persians. Okay, Persians keep pushing in. The Ionian Greeks are asking for assistance. They can't defeat this big Persian army by themselves. Of course they can't. They call all the city-states. Who are you going to call? Not Ghostbusters. You're going to call the you're going to call the Spartans, because of everyone knows they're the best warriors in the land. No pun intended, but they would think about the warriors in basketball. You would want that the best of the best. Okay? So, the important alert, you see the bottom left-hand corner, it's kind of cut off, but it says the Ionian revolt starts the Persian War. That's what you want to write down. Ionian revolt starts the Persian War. So write that down. Now, doesn't go so well for the Ionian Greeks. Athens sends ships and soldiers over across the Aegean. Like, hey, we'll give you some help. Here's some soldiers. Not a lot of soldiers, but enough. And you know what? It doesn't work out so well. Because you remember Darius? Do you remember Darius? Darius the Great? The guy with the huge biceps there? He's great, right? There's 2 swords? You need 2 giant swords? I don't think so. Darius is mad. He is peeved. Okay? Athens will burn for helping the Ionians. I'll burn. I'll cross my hands like this. No problem. Arms. I get it. And what he does is he defeats the Ionians. He defeats those Athenian Greeks that came over across the Aegean. And he goes, you know what? I'm going to send my troops over there. And I got a lot of troops there. We know it's somewhere between 25,000 or so troops that he sends. You can kind of see it here. There's a little bit in the middle there where that curve goes in. 25 to maybe even 40,000 Persians he sends. Okay, on to the plains of, you've probably heard this place before, Marathon. All right, you want to write down that the first battle of the Persian War is the Battle of Marathon. Okay. Battle of Marathon. The name Marathon probably is familiar to you. You're probably like, you know what? I've heard of a marathon before. Where have I heard that before? Well, everything has a purpose. And let's get into how that actually means something to you. The Greeks, the Athenians mostly, will use the phalanx formation, which you already know from your vocabulary is basically a human tank. They get they move in unison. They're so tightly compacted. They have their shields, they have their spears, they have their short swords, and it's like a moving iron tank, human iron tank. Okay, just slaughtering these Persians who don't have this. They don't understand it. You have to move as a unit. You can't just be a single fighter. Okay, Persians don't have the armor. They don't have the training. They just have numbers. That's what the Persians are good at. They're good at having like lots and lots of numbers. If you didn't already know, these are Twizzlers that I'm eating. As you know, today is my creation day. That's how I celebrate. That's how I function on Twizzlers. So what you want to write down is, again, the Battle of Marathon. Long story short, the Greeks win. It's an overwhelming victory. Only 200 Greeks win. Or sorry, only 200 Greeks die. And 6,000 Persians die. That's a pretty big difference, okay? Again, it comes to battle strategy. They kind of made it like a narrow plane. As soon as the Persians got off the ship, the Greeks bull rushed them, you know, in their phalanx formation. And there was a tight window. There was only one location where they could. They had other ships. There were ships that were moving down. They were also fighting. And it was just a massacre on the side of the Persians. Well, the Persians, they have so many, and they're not done. They're not just going to go down without a fight. So if you look at this map, okay, you see the Peloponnesian Peninsula. If you see the Peloponnesian, you know, with the hand, okay, there's a distance. There's Marathon to Athens. So Marathon is kind of north of Athens, and there's a reason it's called a marathon, okay? So if you look here, once they won that battle, okay, I'll go out one more time so you see it. Watch me zoom in. Okay, you see Crete down there on the bottom of the screen. You see the Peloponnesian Peninsula to your left, that hand-looking thing. I'm just zooming in on this location where Athens and Marathon are. Okay, they had defeated the Persians. And the Persians basically went back on their ships and said, you know what? We're just going to sail around this peninsula and attack Athens from the south. Okay? Well, even though the Greeks had won the Battle of Marathon, they still weren't, the war wasn't over. It was just a battle. The war wasn't over because the Persians got on the ships. So all the army basically of the Athenians was at Marathon. Their whole city is defenseless. So they need to get the message out, hey, you prepare for war. Prepare for war. So there's a young runner named Phidippides. Phidippides. That's the name of the actual runner, Phidippides. You can name your next kid Phidippides, or a middle name, depends on what you're feeling. Okay, Phidippides runs 26 miles. Today's 26.2. They had that extra 0.2 on just for good measure. And the legend has it that he ran to tell the Athenians that, hey, we won the Battle of Marathon, but the Persians are coming. Prepare for war. Our armies are marching down. Okay, prepare for war. Allegedly, as soon as he said that, he died of a heart attack. Whether or not it's entirely true, don't know really. But that's where we get Marathon. That's why Marathon is 26 miles, because it is from the city of the area of Marathon down south to Athens to warn the Athenians of the Persians. Okay? Phidippides. So, 10 years pass. 10 years pass. Okay? Now, Darius is obviously super upset about this. Darius is like, how did we lose against the Greeks? There's less of them. We're this cultured Persian Empire. We tolerate religions. We tax people. We have all this great stuff. How could we possibly lose? Answer is, the Greeks wanted it more, basically. But in the meantime, Darius decides that I'm going to rebuild my army. I'm going to attack them again. And that's exactly what he's going to do. So for 10 years or so, he's trying his best to rebuild. But in that meantime, he dies. Unfortunately for him, he dies. And his son Xerxes takes over. He basically has the mentality of his father. You know what, Dad? I'm going to follow in your footsteps, and I'm going to beat the Greeks. I'm going to make you proud by killing all those Greeks. I'm going to make them pay for embarrassing you, Dad. That's what he does. That's what he tries to do, at least, we'll say. There's a big battle, the Battle of Thermopylae, what the trailer in the beginning, the intro, was all about. Okay, it's with the 300 battles, the famous battle, the Battle of Thermopylae. Okay? So, if you look at the map, again, this is on right, Athens is kind of towards the bottom, and you can't really see it here, but where it says the Battle of Thermopylae and the movements to Salamis, that is where Sparta is located. Sparta's only going to send 300 troops, because basically they're like vacationing, they're having a festival, and they're like the religious festival, and they're like, we're not really interested in, that's your problem. If they come down here, we'll deal with them, but whatever, we'll deal with the Persians. Leonidas, the king, one of the two kings, because they're an oligarchy, if you remember, decides that, well, I think this is a bigger problem. This is a Greek problem. This isn't just a Athens or a Sparta problem. This is a Greek problem. I'm going to bring about 300 of my best men to defend this pass. There's a pass called Thermopylae. Okay, this pass is very narrow, and it's on the shoreline. It's really the only main way land-wise into Greece. And if you remember, this is a land invasion. Okay, Darius before him, 10 years earlier, decides to do a sea invasion, crosses the Aegean Sea. Xerxes decides, I'm going to bring a ton of men. I'm going to kind of go around on land, and I'm going to come get you through the land with a lot more troops. The estimates are anywhere from, I've heard, as little as 100,000 to as much as 2 million. That's a whole lot, considering there's only 300 Spartans, and maybe eventually there'll be about a couple thousand Greeks, like Athenians and other Greek city-states will kind of join in defending this pass. Okay, so let's take a look at what I'm talking about. It's the Battle of Thermopylae. You do want to write Battle of Thermopylae down, okay? This is the second battle of the Persian Wars. And you want to put in parentheses 300. That'll help you remember, because you might not remember the Pass of Thermopylae, but as you can see in that first picture there with the Greek phalanx, they're basically walled up. Think about like me going in front of a door, okay, and like leaving the classroom, and I stand in front of the door. All of you can try your best, okay, but I can probably defend it a lot better if I was in the open. A lot of you would get past me if I wasn't just right next to the door. I've got the walls beside me defending it, okay, or blocking you off, and that's what they did. They're like, hey, they used their geography, they used strategy, they used their minds, okay? That's the Greek mentality. That's why they're so great, and there's so much history and so much rich culture, and people study them for centuries because they use their minds, okay? So, and you can kind of see in the second image there, it's that they're right on the shoreline, okay? You know, you can it doesn't matter if you have 2 million troops. Doesn't matter, because they're going to be able to block it. They're going to be able to, you know, your numbers will minimize, okay? This is where we get the 300 Spartans that fend them off for 3 days. Really, the only reason they get by them, okay, the only reason that these Spartans actually lose is because of a Spartan betrays them. His name is Euphrates. This is kind of where people believe we get the term your fault. His name was Euphrates, okay, and he goes and tells Xerxes, the king, the emperor, hey, there's actually another way around. You don't have to lose thousands and thousands of troops every day. And that's what they were doing. They were getting crushed. These Persians were getting crushed. And the Spartans were just like, blah, blah, blah. It was just instantly destroying these, like, pathetic, even, like, the best, they're called, like, the immortals. The best Persian soldiers stood no chance. Like, they sent in their, like, garbage units first, and the Persians, like, thought they were, like, would have that. Spartans slaughtered them. They kept sending in different units and archers and all this stuff, and then they're like, all right, we're going to send our absolute best. We're going to send our immortals. Immortal means like you can't die. And they died. They died. They got destroyed by the Spartans. But the Greeks lose. You do want to put that down for the Battle of Thermopylae. They actually lose that battle. Not because of anything like they did. I mean, they got just betrayed. You know, they were defending them off for 3 days. They're fighting. 3 days of fighting. 3 days of, like, no food, really no water, not a whole lot of anything right there. It's just fighting, fighting. And it's more like pulses. I shouldn't say, like, fighting all the time, because they would fight, 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 and then back off for a little while. And then fight, 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 and then back off. In this little tiny narrow pass, okay? If you want to write this down, you can. The Spartan king is Leonidas. He's the famous king. There's two kings for the Spartans, and an oligarchy. The older wise men of Sparta, essentially. They all work in conjunction. You have a domestic king and you have a foreign king. Well, Leonidas decides, I'm taking the fight to him. Okay, and he's that famous king and bravest king, they say, of Sparta. Okay, so you can write that in if you want to. You can. That's just like a little bit extra. You definitely need to know that Sparta is an oligarchy and what an oligarchy is. Okay. All right. So they lose that. They lose that battle. And what happens is the Persians keep pushing in. Okay, now they have free reign. There was also, they were defending that sea. If you kind of go back to this, okay, do you see how, all right, there's the land route there, okay? There's the land route from Sardis, which is one of the places I told you to remember, okay? They go across the Hellespont, okay? If you remember from the Persian, if you watch the Persian Aegean Empire, they stacked basically pontoon boats to make a land bridge, and that's when Asia and Europe became one. Okay, and then they walked across, was, you know, Xerxes in 480, walked all the way across, and then from northern Greece, which is Macedonia, and then down into the Pass of Thermopylae. But what the plan kind of was to kind of supply the troops as they're going. Okay, so they had around the Cave of Artemisium, as you see there in that map. They were going to supply the troops. So they had two kind of fronts on this battle. they had the land battle at Thermopylae, and then they had Artemisium. Artemisium was the sea battle because the Persians were going to supply this giant, massive army with all their boats and everything. But the Greeks were going to meet them there as well, and they did. They did meet them, and they did a fine job there. They had a lot of success with trapping these Persian ships who were a lot bigger and bulkier, and the Greek ships were fast and maneuverable, but still powerful. Okay, so the naval battle. There's another naval battle. Okay, so this happens around 480 BC. Okay, 480 years before Christ, and they try to surprise the Persians. They try to surprise the Greeks, and the Greeks lure them into this narrow strait. Remember what a strait is? Okay, this Strait of Salamis. They lure them in like, oh yeah, hey, come on in. It's actually pretty good. You'll definitely win if you come in here. So the Persian, these big bulky ships, kind of come in this Persian fleet. Okay, and the Spartans are waiting on either side of this. Okay, and this is what the movie, the second 300 movie is, the Rise of an Empire, is about. It's the Battle of Salamis. That's why it's mostly a sea battle, if you've ever seen the movie. Okay, and as soon as they get into the strait, it's chaos. The thing is, with these ships, they're called triremes, the Greek ships. You can't just, oh, I'm going to, like, there's no cannons, there's no guns. Okay. You have to ram. You have to ram into them. Okay, you can't just. You're not shooting guns. I mean, they did eventually jump onto the ships and fight, but most of it's just, I'm gonna crush you with my trireme. There's a metal piece in the front of the ship, and you gotta aim it correctly and just crush it like that. And that's what these Greeks did. They were so good at it. These big bulky Persian ships like couldn't turn. They were literally doing boat turns, and basically. The Greeks were on jet skis, and the Persians were on like the Titanic, and then these jet skis had like massive battering rams on them. Okay, so it's called the Battle of Salamis because it's on the Salamis Strait. What you need to know is that it's a sea battle that the Greeks win during the Persian War. There's a couple other battles I'm not going to mention, but these are like the big bulky battles. Okay, Thermopylae and Salamis are like the main ones here from when Xerxes is in power, and Xerxes is peeved. They still actually, the Persians get into Athens, and what you remember from earlier in the year, Xerxes burns Athens to the ground. He's like mad because there's no one there. They all left. Like they just all left because they realized that, okay, well, if our best chance, we got to leave this place, and he can't kill anybody, can't do anything. Xerxes would not normally have burnt anything to the ground. He would have left the city intact. But he was really mad at the Greeks. And so he burnt Athens, including, if you remember, the Parthenon. They're going to have to rebuild the Parthenon here eventually. Okay?
It begins as a whisper, a promise.
This is
the lightest of breezes,
the one that I'm talking about. So you can watch this. This is after that. That was the 300 battle. Okay. Yeah. So this is Salamis here. Okay. Persians. Persepolis probably. That's Xerxes. They betray him kind of weirdly in this movie.
A wind, my brothers of sacrifice.
Queen Gorga. That's in the movie. The star is Themistocles. Themistocles is like the bravest of. That's after he's an Athenian.
A wind of vengeance.
That's Salamis there. Xerxes.
Nothing will stop the march of my empire.
I believe that.
I will attack the Greeks with my entire navy.
There will be death and destruction. Yes, there will be.
right there. Boom. Run into him. All right. So the Battle of Salamis. Again, you don't have to write this portion of it, but this like sums it up. Okay. The Persian army is supported by a large fleet. Okay. Success at Artemisium, the previous one in Thermopylae, the ship battle, the sea battle, leads the Athenians to believe they can beat the Persians at sea. Like, hey, we can beat them at sea. No problem. We've done it before. We can do it again. Persians and the Greek meet at a narrow strait called Salamis. This is what I was saying. The trireme being the boat itself, is more maneuverable than these Greek ships. It defeats the Persian navy. Okay, it's a more maneuverable Greek ship, and it defeats that Persian bulky naval ship. Okay, so outcomes. Do you want to write like Persian War outcomes? Like, what's the outcome of this? Okay, so the Parthenon, as we know it, was built after that. They had kind of like a smaller version of it, but this is in commemoration to the Persian War. This is very, very important to know this. You remember what the Parthenon looks like. You need to be able to identify it, okay? It represents democracy today because this preserved democracy. If the Persians come in and defeat the Greeks, democracy dies. But they preserved it. It's literally a David versus Goliath type of war. You have the Goliath in Persia, and you have the David in the Greeks. So it's dedicated to Athena, okay? What the city is named, Athens, Athena, that's where the city is named after. So the Parthenon is located in Athens. The Parthenon is a temple dedicated to Athena because they believe that she was they prayed to her and so forth, and believe that she was the help that they needed to win this war. Okay, she's the goddess of wisdom. Okay, she's the goddess of wisdom and battle strategy and defense, all things they used. If they wouldn't have used all the strategy, the geography around them, the narrow straits, the narrow passes, and used their lack of numbers to their advantage and used the geography, they wouldn't have won it. So, the Delian League was created after this. So Persia goes back home. Athens and Sparta, they become really powerful. That's what you would need to write down, that they become powerful. And they both create separate leagues, okay? You know how you have like the AFC and the NFC and the NFL, okay? Or the AL and the NL and baseball. It's like this. You have the Delian League headed by Athens, all right? They're like, hey, we're the most powerful. All you other weaker Greek city-states, because it's not just Athens and Sparta. There are a ton of other Greek city-states there. Organize a mutual defense group to prevent future attacks. So they're like, hey, start giving us some money. We'll start building ships, and we'll defend because the Persians will be back. They'll be back. I promise you they'll be back. And they're like, okay, we'll give you money. Here you go. All right. Athens and Sparta create their league. Well, what's the Spartan League? The Spartan League is called, get this, the Peloponnesian League. Very, very clever on their part, okay? They have theirs. They're going to come into conflict with one another very, very soon, okay? But also you want to write down, this will be the next portion eventually we talk about, the Macedonians will gain land in the north of Greece. Alexander the Great, spoiler, will be at the head of that. You'll see very soon that they will come into play. Okay? Alrighty, and we'll talk about that, not next time, but soon, because we're going to get into the golden age of Pericles in episode 7. Remember the Pericles from your vocab? He'll be back, and he'll be ready for you. Until next time, this is Shankism with Mr. Shank.
What California. Hey, hey, passing through me from my heart to LA. All I want is for you to stay. Love is like a Gibson Ray.